So what does the White House plan to exit the I.N.F. treaty mean for global security? Paolo Von Schirach joins me to help put this all in perspective. He is president of the Global Policy Institute, an independent research center focused on international affairs. Paolo, thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Well, President Trump claims Russia's been violating this arms agreement. What do you think about his justification for this withdrawal?
Well, actually, the alleged violations go back several years. Before the Trump administration, even during the Obama administration, the State Department, which is mandated to report on compliance of major treaties by parties that work with the United States, had already noted that, or I think it goes back to 2014. So, but the Obama administration, noted that, but didn't take any action. That's really the critical distinction. Why did President Trump choose this particular moment to denounce essentially the treaty and proclaim that the United States intends to withdraw? It's not entirely clear to me. We got the elections coming here in the U.S. There's complicated relations with Russia on other fronts. We've got complicated relations with China, on a different front, but which may be affected in the sense that China, that is not a party to this treaty, has therefore no limitations in developing this particular class of weapons. The United States claims that this changed the balance of power in Asia, and that therefore the United States has its hands tied by these restrictions. But most fundamentally, the allegation is that Russia has been cheating, and that therefore the United States shouldn't be bound by the limitations of the treaty.
And Russia has already responded. They've threatened to retaliate. Could we be heading for a very dangerous tit for tat here?
Well, look, it's not a good thing, because this treaty, the importance of this treaty, which goes back to 1987, that came into force in 1988, is that it eliminated across the board an entire class of weapons. This was a huge achievement by then U.S. President Ronald Reagan, and then Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev on the other side. So it was the first time in which the two superpowers, armed with heavy nuclear weapons arsenals, agreed to eliminate an entire class of weapons. And more or less, this whole thing hung together for a number of decades now. So if this agreement is abandoned because the United States will withdraw, by the way, it takes technically speaking several months before this becomes effective, then we are into uncertain territory, also because the other and more important nuclear weapons treaty on strategic weapons, that is long-range weapons, it's up for renewal in just a few years. So if we are headed towards the idea that we don't want to do treaties with Russia, and is this just the first installment, and then the next one would be not to agree on either a renewal, an extension, or a renegotiation of the existing strategic arms control treaty, that's not good.
And you mentioned China, Paolo, is not a signatory, but why would Trump mention China when he announced this withdrawal, you think?
Well, because again, here we are, unfortunately, in a new uncertain season of relations between the United States and China, accused by the United States now of all sorts of bad things across the board, whether it's about trade or about geopolitics, the South China Sea, the Belt and Road Initiative as an excuse to get everybody into debt. So and hopefully there is more noise than reality here. But if cooler heads don't prevail, then we're getting ourselves into not exactly a good scenario of troubled relations with China, troubled relations with Russia, not so warm relation overall with Europe, our traditional allies. So for the United States to embark in a kind of a belligerent tone, not just on trade issues, but now on geopolitics and strategy and armaments, it's not such a good thing. Again, John Bolton, the National Security Advisor, is headed for Russia. Maybe this was kind of a shot across the bow to tell the Russians, hey, we know you've been misbehaving somehow regarding your own development of a weapon system, which we claim is against the rules. They claim, of course, the Russians, that it is not. They deny this firmly. But maybe this is just a ploy to negotiate and to prevent the Russians from deploying this new class of weapons. I'm not quite sure. I hope, again, cooler heads prevail.
Really quickly, last question is, what does this mean for other countries, particularly Europe, who are in the range?
Of course, well, very important, because those weapons were deployed initially back in the 1980s in Europe. Eastern Europe and Western Europe on the American side. So Europe could see itself as the battleground of any kind of short range, nuclear exchange that could be achieved through short range or intermediate range weapons. So the Europeans kind of feel very uneasy because they don't have the weapons, and they become the place where the big guys, so to speak, Russia and America, fight the war. I think this is hopefully an unlikely scenario, but if I were in Europe, I would be concerned.
They're caught in the middle. Well, a lot to look at in the next couple of months now.
Again, hopefully the negotiations will take place.
We'll see how it all plays out. Paolo Von Schirach of the Global Policy Institute, thanks so much for coming in.
You're welcome. Thank you.